I never thought journaling would destroy my marriage. But here I am, sitting in our home office at 2 in the morning, staring at the leather-bound notebook that Rachel found yesterday. The same notebook my therapist encouraged me to keep. The same notebook where I wrote things I never meant for anyone to see, especially not my wife. My name is Maya Santos. I'm 34 years old, and until 72 hours ago, I thought I had my life figured out. I'm a freelance graphic designer working from home, married to an incredible woman who happens to be one of the most respected couples therapists in our city. Rachel and I have been together for 7 years. We own a beautiful craftsman house in the Arts District. We have a rescue dog named Biscuit. Our friends call us relationship goals. The queer community in our city holds us up as an example of what love can look like when you find your person. Except I'm not sure Rachel is my person anymore. And the worst part is, I didn't realize it until I started writing about someone else. Let me back up 6 months. That's when Rachel first suggested I see a therapist. Not because anything was catastrophically wrong, but because I'd been having these panic attacks. They started small. A tightness in my chest when I had too many client deadlines. Trouble sleeping before big presentations. Then they got worse. I'd wake up at 3 in the morning convinced I was dying, my heart racing so fast I thought it would explode out of my chest. Rachel was worried. Of course she was worried. She's a therapist. She sees the signs. She knows the statistics about untreated anxiety. So she did what any caring spouse would do. She referred me to a colleague at her clinic. That colleague was Dr. Jade Rivers. I remember the first time I met Jade. It was a rainy Tuesday in March, the kind of cold gray rain that makes you want to stay in bed all day. I almost canceled the appointment 3 times, but Rachel had already told everyone at the clinic that her wife was finally getting help, and I couldn't bear to disappoint her. So I showed up 15 minutes early, dripping wet, clutching a coffee that had gone cold during my nervous drive across town. The clinic is in a converted Victorian house near the university. It's painted a cheerful lavender color with rainbow flags in the windows and a sign that reads Safe Space Counseling Collective. Rachel helped found it 8 years ago with 3 other queer therapists. It's the only explicitly LGBTQ-affirming mental health clinic within 50 miles. They do sliding scale fees. They offer support groups. They've become a cornerstone of our community. I sat in the waiting room watching rain streak down the windows, trying not to think about how many of Rachel's friends and colleagues were working in offices just down the hall, trying not to think about how everyone here knew me as Rachel's wife, the successful one, the stable one, the one who had it all together. Then Jade's door opened. She was younger than I expected. 31, I'd learn later, though she could have passed for younger with her undercut and the small constellation of ear piercings climbing up her left ear. She wore dark jeans and a soft gray sweater, chunky boots that looked like they'd been through a dozen music festivals. She had kind eyes. That's what I noticed first. Not just kind in that professional therapist way, but genuinely warm, like she was already on your side before you even spoke. "Come on in," she said. "You must be Maya." Her office wasn't what I expected either. No leather couch, no desk creating a power dynamic between us. Instead, there were 2 comfortable chairs angled toward each other, a low table between them holding a box of tissues, and a small succulent garden. The walls were covered in art. Not the bland motivational posters you see in some therapists' offices, but real art. Paintings and prints and photographs that looked like they meant something. In one corner, there was an easel with paints and brushes. "Art therapy," Jade explained, following my gaze. "Not everyone connects with traditional talk therapy. Sometimes we need other ways to process what we're feeling." That first session, I barely said anything meaningful. I gave her the basics. The panic attacks. The insomnia. The feeling that I was drowning in deadlines and expectations, and the weight of being a functional adult. She didn't push. She just listened. And then, toward the end of the hour, she said something that stuck with me. "You know what I notice? You've talked for 50 minutes about your work, your responsibilities, your wife's career, your dog's anxiety. But you haven't mentioned yourself once. Not who you are, not what you want, not what you feel, just what you do for everyone else." I went home and cried in the shower for 20 minutes. Rachel asked how it went. I said it was fine. Good even. Jade seemed nice, professional. Exactly what I needed. I didn't tell her that I couldn't stop thinking about that observation, that it had cracked something open inside me that I didn't know how to close. Jade suggested I start journaling. She said it might help between sessions, give me a place to process thoughts that came up during the week. So I bought a nice leather journal from the stationery store downtown, the kind with thick, cream-colored pages that feel substantial under your pen, the kind that makes you want to write important things. At first, I wrote what you'd expect, mundane observations about my day, client frustrations, anxiety symptoms. But slowly, over weeks and then months, the entries changed. I started writing about the sessions themselves, about the things Jade said that resonated with me, about how, for 1 hour each week, I felt like someone actually saw me. Not Rachel's wife, not the successful designer, not the woman who had her life together. Just me, Maya, with all my mess and confusion and buried feelings. Then I started writing about Jade herself. Nothing inappropriate at first, just observations. The way she listened with her whole body, leaning forward slightly, her eyes never leaving mine. The way she remembered tiny details from previous sessions, making me feel like what I said actually mattered. The way she shared small pieces of her own story when it was relevant, about growing up queer in a conservative family, about the pressure to be perfect, about learning to choose authenticity over comfort. But somewhere around month 3, the entries shifted again. I started noticing things that had nothing to do with therapy, the way afternoon light caught in her dark hair, the small scar on her left hand that she touched when she was thinking, the sound of her laugh when I said something unexpectedly funny, the fact that I looked forward to Tuesdays more than any other day of the week. And then I started comparing. I didn't mean to. It just happened. I'd write about a session with Jade, about how understood I felt, how seen, how valued. And then I'd write about coming home to Rachel, who was usually working late or exhausted from her own clients or distracted by clinic drama. I'd write about how we'd become more like roommates than spouses, how we had dinner together maybe twice a week, how we hadn't had sex in 4 months, how I couldn't remember the last time we'd had a real conversation that wasn't about logistics or schedules or who needed to take Biscuit to the vet. I wrote about how Rachel felt more like my mother than my partner, always checking in on me, always worried about my mental health, always treating me like a problem to be solved rather than a person to be loved. And I wrote about how different it felt with Jade, how electric, how alive. I wrote things I never said out loud, like how I wondered what it would be like to kiss her, how I imagined conversations we might have outside the therapy room, how I fantasized about running into her at a coffee shop or a bookstore, somewhere neutral where we could just be 2 people talking, without the professional boundaries. I wrote that I thought I might be falling in love with my therapist. And then I wrote that I wasn't sure I loved my wife anymore. I never intended for Rachel to read any of it. The journal lived in my office, in the desk drawer where I kept personal things. Rachel respected my space. We had good boundaries like that. Or so I thought. Last Wednesday, I had a morning client call that ran long. I was in our bedroom, laptop balanced on my knees, talking through branding concepts for a new restaurant. Rachel was in my office, looking for a specific design book she wanted to reference for a workshop she was preparing. At least, that's what she told me later. What she found instead was my journal, sitting on my desk, open to a page from 2 weeks ago. I'd been journaling the night before and forgot to put it away. A stupid, careless mistake that changed everything. I didn't know she'd found it until I came downstairs after my call and found her sitting at the kitchen table. The journal was in front of her. Her face was pale. Her hands were shaking. "Maya," she said, her voice very quiet, very controlled. "We need to talk." My stomach dropped. I knew immediately what had happened. There's no other reason she'd have that expression, that tone, that carefully practiced therapeutic composure that meant she was barely holding it together. I sat down across from her. I couldn't look at the journal, couldn't look at her. "How much did you read?" I asked. "Enough." The silence stretched between us. Outside, I could hear neighborhood kids playing, a dog barking, normal life continuing while mine fell apart. Rachel opened the journal to a page marked with her finger. She started reading out loud, her voice shaking now. "I can't stop thinking about today's session. The way Jade looked at me when I talked about feeling invisible in my own marriage. Like she really understood. Like she's felt it too. I wonder if she knows how much these sessions mean to me. I wonder if she feels it too, this connection, this electricity. I wonder what would happen if I told her that I've started counting down the days between appointments. That Tuesday has become the only day I feel like myself." Rachel closed the journal. When she looked up at me, there were tears in her eyes. "How long?" she asked. "How long have you been in love with my colleague? With my friend?" "I'm not," I started, but the lie died in my throat. What was the point? She'd read my words. She knew. "I don't know," I said finally. "I don't even know if that's what this is. You wrote that you're not sure you love me anymore." Her voice broke on the last word. In 7 years together, I'd rarely seen Rachel cry. She was the strong one. The composed one. The one who held space for everyone else's emotions while keeping her own carefully locked away. "Rachel," I said, reaching for her hand. She pulled away. Don't. Just don't. She stood up, paced to the window, wrapped her arms around herself. Do you have any idea what you've done? Not just to us, but to Jade? To the clinic? She could lose her license, Maya. If anyone finds out that there was even the possibility of feelings between a therapist and a client, even if nothing physical happened, it's an ethics violation. It could destroy her career. It could destroy everything we've built. Nothing happened, I said desperately. We never crossed any lines. She's been completely professional. This is all in my head. She probably doesn't even— You don't know that. You can't know that. And now I have to tell her. I have to tell Jade that my wife has been having an emotional affair with her through therapeutic journaling. I have to watch my friend's face when she realizes that she might have missed the signs of transference, that she might lose everything because my wife fell in love with her. It's not her fault, I said. Please don't blame her for this. Rachel laughed, but there was no humor in it. I'm not blaming her. I'm blaming you. And myself. For not seeing that our marriage was this broken. For being so focused on my career that I didn't notice my wife was falling in love with someone else. We're not broken. I tried. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. Rachel turned to face me fully. Be honest with me. For once, just be completely honest. Do you want to save this marriage? Or have you already decided you'd rather blow up our entire life for the possibility of something with Jade? I opened my mouth, closed it. I didn't know the answer. That was the worst part. I genuinely didn't know. I need time, I said finally. Time, Rachel repeated. Right. Okay. Well, I need you to not be here right now. I need you to pack a bag and go stay somewhere else while I figure out what the hell I'm supposed to do with this information. Where am I supposed to go? I don't care. A hotel. Your sister's place. Anywhere but here. Because if I have to look at you right now, I'm going to say things I can't take back. So I packed a bag. I grabbed my laptop and some clothes and my toiletries. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, looking at the life we'd built together. The framed photos on the dresser, the mismatched furniture we'd collected over the years, the reading lamp on Rachel's side of the bed that I'd given her for her birthday 3 years ago. I'm sorry, I said. For whatever that's worth, I'm so sorry. Rachel didn't answer. She was sitting on the bed, the journal open in her lap, reading more of my private thoughts, discovering more ways I'd betrayed her without even realizing I was doing it. I drove to a hotel near the airport, one of those extended stay places with a kitchenette and free Wi-Fi and the smell of industrial cleaning products. I sat on the bed in the dark and cried. Not because I regretted what I'd written, but because I knew, deep down, that I'd been lying to myself for months, maybe years. My marriage was over, and I'd been too afraid to admit it until someone else discovered the truth. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 32 text messages. Most were from Rachel. A few were from mutual friends, asking if I was okay, if we were okay, using that careful language people use when they know something's wrong but don't want to pry. One text was from an unknown number. Maya, this is Jade Rivers. Rachel told me what happened. I think we need to talk. Not as therapist and client. That relationship is terminated effective immediately, but as people who are both caught in a situation that neither of us intended. Can we meet? Somewhere neutral? I stared at the message for 10 minutes before responding. Coffee? There's a place downtown. The Grind. 2 o'clock? Her response came immediately. I'll be there. I spent the next 4 hours in a state of nauseous anxiety. I changed clothes 3 times. I practiced what I would say. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. I know I've ruined your professional relationship with Rachel. I know I've potentially put your career at risk. I know I'm a horrible person. But when I walked into the Grind at 1:55 and saw Jade sitting in the back corner, nursing a cup of tea, all my prepared words evaporated. She looked exhausted. There were dark circles under her eyes. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. She was wearing jeans and an old hoodie, not her usual put-together therapist attire. I sat down across from her. Neither of us spoke for a long moment. Finally, Jade said, I've been a therapist for 8 years. I've dealt with transference before. I know the signs. I should have caught this. It's not your fault, I said immediately. You didn't do anything wrong. She laughed bitterly. Maya, I'm trained to recognize when a client is developing feelings beyond the therapeutic relationship. I'm trained to address it, to redirect it, to maintain boundaries. And I didn't. Because somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing you as just a client. My breath caught. What? Jade looked up at me, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen during our sessions. Vulnerability, fear, and something else I couldn't quite name. I had a meeting with my clinical supervisor this morning, Rachel insisted. She was well within her rights. If there's even a hint of impropriety, the clinic's reputation is at stake. So I sat there for 2 hours while my supervisor grilled me about our sessions. About whether I maintained appropriate boundaries. About whether I noticed signs that you were developing feelings. About whether I had feelings of my own that might have clouded my judgment. And, I whispered, and I realized that I did. I do. I have been looking forward to your sessions more than any others on my schedule. I have been thinking about you between appointments. I have been sharing more of myself with you than I should. Not in any overt way. Not in any way that crosses clear ethical lines. But enough that I should have recognized what was happening and referred you to someone else. She wrapped her hands around her tea mug, staring into it like it held answers. I told my supervisor that I think I need to take a leave of absence. That I need to examine whether I'm fit to practice right now. That I clearly have some boundary issues I need to work through. No, I said urgently. No, you can't let this destroy your career. You're an amazing therapist. You helped me more in 3 months than anyone else has in years. You can't leave the clinic because of my feelings, because of my journal entries, because I was stupid enough to write things down and leave them where Rachel could find them. Jade's eyes met mine. It's not just your feelings, Maya. That's what I'm trying to tell you. I felt it too. This connection, this pull, and I ignored it because I wanted to keep seeing you. I convinced myself it was just good therapeutic rapport, that I was helping you. But the truth is, I was helping myself too. You made me feel less alone. You understood things about growing up queer, about family pressure, about the weight of expectations, in ways that most people don't. And I let that cloud my professional judgment. What are we supposed to do now? I asked. Jade sighed. I don't know. Rachel wants me to transfer clinics, move to a different practice. She says she can't work in the same building as me, knowing what she knows. And honestly, I don't blame her. Our friendship is destroyed. 10 years of trust and collaboration and mutual support, gone. Because I caught feelings for her wife and didn't have the professional integrity to address it. You can't take all the blame for this, I said. I'm the one who fell first. I'm the one who wrote those things in my journal. I'm the one whose marriage was already dying and I was too blind to see it. Was it dying? Jade asked quietly. Or did you just finally wake up to the fact that it wasn't what you needed? I don't know. Maybe both. We sat in silence for a while. Around us, the coffee shop hummed with afternoon energy. Students studying, freelancers typing away on laptops, couples on dates, normal people living normal lives, unaware that 2 women in the back corner were watching their entire worlds crumble. I need to tell you something, Jade said finally, and I need you to really hear me. Even if nothing physical ever happened between us, even if we never crossed that line, what we had was still an emotional affair. You were married. I was your therapist. We both developed feelings that we didn't address appropriately, and that has consequences. Real ones. I know, I whispered. I don't think you do. Rachel came to my apartment last night, after she found your journal, before she told me what happened. She stood in my doorway and asked me if I had feelings for you. Point blank. No therapeutic language, no professional courtesy, just one friend asking another friend if she'd been falling in love with her wife. What did you say? I lied. I told her no. I told her that what you felt was transference, that I'd handled it appropriately, that there was nothing to worry about, and then she showed me some of what you wrote. And I couldn't maintain the lie, because Maya, you described moments between us that I remembered too. Looks that lasted a beat too long, conversations that felt more intimate than they should, the way we both leaned in when we talked, like we were sharing secrets instead of doing therapy. She started crying, not dramatic sobs, just quiet tears sliding down her cheeks. Rachel asked me if I loved you, and I couldn't answer. Because I don't know if what I feel is love or if it's just the intoxicating pull of forbidden connection. And I don't get to find out. Because I'm your therapist, or I was, and that means these feelings are automatically unethical, no matter how genuine they might be. I reached across the table, wanting to take her hand, but stopped myself. Even that felt like crossing a line now. So what happens now? I asked. You transfer to a different clinic. I find a new therapist. Rachel and I get divorced. And we all just move on like this never happened? Jade wiped her eyes. I don't think it's that simple. Rachel wants us to do couples therapy. You and her, I mean. With a neutral therapist, someone who doesn't know either of us. She thinks you owe her that much. A real attempt to save the marriage before you blow it up completely. And if I don't want to save it, then you need to be honest about that. With her and with yourself. But Maya, you need to be sure. Because if you end your marriage hoping that something can happen between us, you're going to be disappointed. Even if I do have feelings for you, acting on them would be an ethics violation. I'd lose my license. I'd lose everything I've worked for. And honestly, any relationship that started under these circumstances would be poisoned from the beginning. I felt tears burning in my own eyes now. So there's no scenario where we get to find out if this is real. No, there isn't. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I let this happen. I'm sorry that I wasn't the professional I should have been. I'm sorry that your marriage is ending, and part of that is because of the connection we formed. But Maya, I need you to understand something else. What? Even if I never see you again after today, even if we go our separate ways and you work things out with Rachel or you don't, what you discovered through this process matters. You discovered that you're not happy, that you've been performing happiness for years, that you've been so busy being what everyone else needs that you forgot to be yourself. That's real. That's valid. And you shouldn't ignore that just because the catalyst was complicated. I sat with that for a moment. She was right. Whatever I felt for Jade, whatever she felt for me, the underlying truth remained. My marriage was broken. I was unhappy. I'd been unhappy for a long time, maybe since the beginning, but I'd been too afraid to admit it. I need to go, Jade said, standing up. I have another meeting with my supervisor this afternoon. We're figuring out the logistics of my transfer. But Maya, please take care of yourself. Find a good therapist. Someone who can help you navigate this without the complications I brought to the table. And be honest, with Rachel, with yourself, about what you really want from your life. She paused at the edge of the table. For what it's worth, I think you're incredibly brave. It takes courage to admit when something isn't working, even when that admission destroys everything you've built. Then she left. And I sat alone in the grind for another 2 hours, nursing a cold coffee, trying to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do next. That evening, I texted Rachel, "Can we talk? In person?" Her response came 20 minutes later. "Come home. We need to figure this out." When I walked through the door of our house, it felt different, like something fundamental had shifted. Biscuit greeted me with his usual enthusiasm, jumping and wagging, oblivious to human drama. But Rachel stood in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, her face carefully neutral. We sat at the dining room table, the same table where we'd hosted dozens of dinner parties, where we'd made plans and celebrated anniversaries and talked about adopting a child someday. Now it felt like a negotiating table, a place where marriages came to die. "I talked to Jade," Rachel said without preamble. "She told me what she told you. About her feelings, about the transfer, about everything." "Okay," I said carefully. "And I talked to a therapist of my own, someone outside the clinic, someone who specializes in infidelity and relationship repair. She helped me understand that what happened between you and Jade, even though it was never physical, still constitutes emotional infidelity, still constitutes a betrayal of our marriage." "I know," I said, "and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Rachel held up her hand. "Let me finish." She also helped me understand that this didn't happen in a vacuum, that people don't develop feelings for others when their marriages are healthy. That I've been so focused on building the clinic, on being the perfect therapist for everyone else, that I stopped being a good partner to you. "That's not entirely fair," I started, but Rachel interrupted. "It's true, Maya. When was the last time we went on a date? A real date, not just grabbing takeout because we were both too exhausted to cook. When was the last time we had sex because we wanted to, not because we felt obligated? When was the last time we talked about something other than logistics and bills and who needed to take the dog out?" I couldn't answer, because she was right. "I'm not excusing what you did," Rachel continued. "But I'm also not going to pretend that our marriage was perfect before Jade came into the picture. We've been coasting for years, going through the motions, and I'm as responsible for that as you are. So what do you want to do?" I asked. Rachel took a deep breath. "I want to try. I want us to go to couples therapy. I want us to really examine whether this marriage is worth saving. But Maya, I need you to be all in. I need you to be willing to do the hard work. To be honest, to figure out if what you felt for Jade was real or if it was just an escape from the problems we already had. And if we do the work and realize we're not right for each other, then we end it, cleanly, with dignity. We don't drag this out for another 7 years because we're too afraid to admit we made a mistake. I looked at this woman I'd married, this brilliant, accomplished, beautiful woman who'd been my partner for 7 years, and I realized that somewhere along the way, we'd stopped being partners and started being roommates. We'd stopped choosing each other and started simply existing in the same space. Okay, I said. I'll try. I'll do the therapy. I'll do whatever it takes to figure out if we can fix this. But even as I said it, I wondered if I was being honest, or if I was just buying time, avoiding the truth that I didn't want to face. We started couples therapy the following week. Dr. Andrea Morrison was everything you'd want in a therapist handling this kind of crisis. Older, experienced, no connection to either of us or the clinic. Her office was in a converted warehouse in the Arts District, all exposed brick and plants and comfortable furniture that didn't feel clinical. The first session was brutal. Dr. Morrison asked us to each bring our journal entries, the things we'd written about our marriage over the past few months. Rachel brought hers from her own therapy. I brought mine, the infamous journal that had started everything. She had us read passages out loud to each other. Not the parts about Jade specifically, but the parts where we'd each expressed our unhappiness, our frustrations, our sense of disconnection. Rachel read an entry from 6 months ago where she'd written about coming home to find me asleep on the couch, having given up on waiting for her to finish with a late client. She'd written, I look at Maya and I see obligation. I see someone I'm responsible for. Someone whose mental health I need to monitor. Someone whose panic attacks I need to manage. I don't see my wife. I don't see my lover. I don't see my partner. I see a patient. And that's not fair to either of us. I read an entry from around the same time where I'd written, I can't remember the last time Rachel looked at me and really saw me. Not the anxious, broken version of me that needs fixing. Just me. The person she fell in love with. Or maybe she never saw that person. Maybe I've been performing for her from the beginning, trying to be stable enough, successful enough, together enough to deserve her love. Dr. Morrison let the words hang in the air. What I'm hearing from both of you is a fundamental disconnect between who you are and who you believe your partner needs you to be. Rachel, you've positioned yourself as Maya's caretaker rather than her equal. Maya, you've accepted that role and built resentment around it. Is that accurate? We both nodded. And Jade, Dr. Morrison continued, served as a mirror for Maya, someone who saw her as whole rather than broken, someone who created space for her to be vulnerable without judgment. The feelings that developed were perhaps less about Jade as a person and more about the role she played in helping Maya remember who she was. I thought about that. Was it true? Was what I felt for Jade just gratitude and relief at being seen? Or was it something deeper? Over the next few weeks, we peeled back layers of our marriage. We talked about how we'd gotten together in the first place. Both of us in our late 20s, both of us still figuring out who we were as queer women. Rachel was finishing her PhD in psychology. I was working at a design agency, burning out fast. We'd met at a community fundraiser. She'd been so confident, so self-assured, so clear about what she wanted from life. And I'd been drowning in anxiety and imposter syndrome, desperate for someone stable to hold on to. We'd mistaken rescue for love. I needed someone to save me, I said during one session, and you needed someone to save. We built a marriage on those needs instead of on genuine partnership. Rachel cried when I said that, but she didn't disagree. The thing is, Dr. Morrison said, people can change, needs can evolve. The question isn't whether you started from a dysfunctional place. Lots of relationships do. The question is whether you want to rebuild from here, whether you can see each other differently now, whether you can create something new together. I wanted to want that. I tried to want it. But every time I sat in that office with Rachel, every time we did our homework assignments and practiced active listening and worked through our resentments, I felt further away from her rather than closer. Meanwhile, Jade had transferred to a clinic across town. I knew this because Rachel told me, her voice tight with pain. She'd lost her best friend, her trusted colleague, the person she'd built her professional life around. And it was my fault. I also knew, though I didn't tell Rachel, that Jade had texted me twice since our meeting at the grind. Once to ask if I was okay. Once to tell me she was thinking of me and hoping therapy was helping. I hadn't responded to either message, but I'd read them approximately 500 times. 2 months into couples therapy, Dr. Morrison asked us to do an exercise. She had us imagine our marriage 5 years in the future if we stayed together and did all the work. Then she had us imagine our lives 5 years in the future if we separated. Rachel went first. She described a version of our marriage where we'd rediscovered connection, where we went on monthly weekend trips, where we had better boundaries around work, where we'd adopted a child and were raising them together, where we hosted Sunday dinners and went to protests together and supported each other's dreams. Her voice was wistful, hopeful, desperately wanting to believe in that future. Then it was my turn. I tried to imagine that same future, tried to see us happy together. But all I could see was more of the same, more careful conversations, more managed expectations, more trying to be what the other person needed instead of who we actually were. Now imagine the other path, Dr. Morrison prompted gently. I took a deep breath. 5 years from now, if we're not together, I'm living alone. Maybe in a smaller place, maybe even a different city. I'm still doing design work, but I'm more selective about clients. I have time for hobbies again. I've started painting, something I gave up years ago because I was too busy, too anxious, too focused on being productive. I have a therapist I see regularly. Not because I'm broken, but because I value that space for reflection. I have friends who know me as just Maya, not as Rachel's wife. I've dated a little. Nothing serious yet, but I'm learning what I actually want from partnership instead of just accepting what feels safe. I'm lonely sometimes, but I'm also more myself than I've been in years. I looked up at Rachel. She was crying. So was I. And Jade? Dr. Morrison asked quietly. Is she in that future? I hesitated. I don't know. I hope so. Not necessarily romantically. Maybe that could never work, given how we met. But I'd like to think we could be friends someday. That we could have coffee and talk about art and therapy and life, without all this weight and guilt and complication. Rachel stood up abruptly. I need a break. She left the office. Dr. Morrison and I sat in silence for a moment. That was honest, Dr. Morrison said finally. Painful, but honest. The question is whether you're ready to act on that honesty. I am, I said. I think I've known for a while. I just didn't want to hurt her. I didn't want to blow up our life. I didn't want to be the bad guy. Sometimes being the bad guy is actually the kindest thing you can do. Sometimes letting someone go is the greatest act of love. When Rachel came back, her face was composed, resolved. I heard what you said, she told me, and I can't pretend it didn't hurt. But Maya, I heard something else too. I heard you describe a version of yourself that I've never met. A version that maybe you've never been able to be because you were too busy being my wife. And that's not fair to you. It's also not fair to me, because I deserve someone who actually wants to be married to me, not someone who's staying out of obligation. So what are you saying? I asked. I'm saying I think we should separate. Not just living apart for a few weeks, but actually ending this marriage. Because I don't think either of us wants to fight for it anymore. And that's okay. That doesn't make us failures. It just makes us human. I felt relief wash over me, and guilt for feeling relieved, and sadness. All of it at once. Okay, I said. Okay. We spent the next 2 hours with Dr. Morrison making plans. How we'd divide our belongings, who would keep the house or whether we'd sell it, what we'd tell our friends and family, how we'd navigate the queer community that had held us up as an ideal couple. It was practical and painful and necessary. That night, I moved my stuff out completely. Not to a hotel this time, but to a short-term rental I'd found. A tiny studio apartment with exposed brick and big windows and a view of the river. It was just me and Biscuit, who Rachel had agreed I should take since I'd be home more. I set up my laptop on a folding table, hung some prints on the walls, made the space mine. And then I sat down and wrote Jade a message, not a text, an actual email. I know we're not supposed to be in contact. I know it's complicated. But I wanted you to know that Rachel and I are separating. We're getting divorced. And while our connection was part of what brought everything to the surface, you were right. The marriage was dying long before you came into the picture. You just helped me see it. I'm not writing this because I expect anything from you. I'm not asking for a relationship or even a friendship, though I'd be open to that someday if the ethics allow it. I'm writing because I wanted you to know that the work we did together, even though it ended in chaos, helped me find myself again. Helped me remember that I'm allowed to want things, to feel things, to be messy and complicated and still worthy of love. So thank you. For listening, for seeing me, for being brave enough to admit you felt something too, even though it cost you so much. I hope you're doing okay. I hope you find a new practice where you can do the incredible work you do. I hope someday we can look back on this and see it for what it was. Not a scandal or a failure, but two people accidentally finding each other at exactly the wrong time and somehow still managing to help each other grow. Take care of yourself, Jade. I hit send before I could overthink it. Her response came 3 days later. Maya, thank you for writing. I'm so sorry about your marriage, and I'm proud of you for choosing honesty over comfort. That takes real courage. I'm still processing everything, still working through my own feelings and my own mistakes. I've been seeing a therapist myself, trying to understand how I let my boundaries get so blurred, trying to figure out if I'm okay to continue practicing or if I need more time away. But I wanted you to know that you helped me too. You reminded me why I do this work in the first place, why I became a therapist. Because those moments of real connection, of genuine seeing and being seen, are what make us human. Yes, I mishandled it. Yes, there were consequences. But I don't regret knowing you, Maya. I just wish we'd met under different circumstances. I think we need space right now. Time for both of us to heal and grow and figure out who we are outside of the situation. But maybe someday, when enough time has passed and when the ethical complications have faded, we could be friends. Real friends. Not therapist and client, not forbidden anything. Just two people who understand each other. Until then, take care of yourself. Keep painting. Keep journaling. Keep being brave. I read that email probably 100 times. I printed it out and put it in a new journal, the one I'd started after everything fell apart, the one where I was writing a different kind of story. Not one where I was waiting to be rescued or trying to be perfect, but one where I was learning to be complicated and messy and authentic. The divorce took 6 months to finalize. Rachel and I managed it with surprising grace. We were kind to each other, respectful. We divided our belongings without fighting. We told our friends together, acknowledging that both of us had contributed to the marriage's failure, that neither of us was the villain. The queer community took it hard. We'd been their golden couple. But they rallied around both of us, creating space for us to grieve separately while still staying connected to the community we'd built together. Rachel started dating someone new about 4 months after we separated. Another therapist, someone who worked in trauma recovery, someone who seemed more her speed, more intellectually matched, more interested in the same things. I was happy for her and surprised to find that I meant it. I dated a little too. Nothing serious. A few coffee dates. One brief relationship that lasted about 6 weeks before we both realized we were better as friends. I was learning what I wanted, what I didn't want, how to be vulnerable without being desperate, how to be alone without being lonely. And I painted. God, I painted. My tiny studio apartment became filled with canvases, abstract pieces full of color and emotion, portraits of imagined people, landscapes of places I'd never been but wanted to visit. I even had a small show at a local gallery, sold 3 pieces, felt a validation I hadn't experienced in years. I didn't contact Jade. She didn't contact me. We'd agreed on space, and we honored that agreement, but I thought about her, often, wondered how she was doing. Whether she was still practicing therapy or had taken a break, whether she thought about me too. Time has a way of putting things in perspective. What felt like a world-ending catastrophe slowly became just a chapter in my life. A painful one, sure, but also a necessary one. The chapter where I learned that love isn't enough if you're not being yourself. That rescue isn't the same as partnership, that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let go. 2 years after everything fell apart, I got an invitation in the mail. A conference on mental health and creative expression, sponsored by several therapy organizations in the city. One of the keynote speakers was Dr. Jade Rivers, presenting on the intersection of art therapy and trauma recovery. I stared at that invitation for a week, debated whether to go, whether enough time had passed, whether seeing her again would help or hurt. In the end, I went. The conference was held at a downtown hotel in one of those massive ballrooms with chandeliers and round tables and terrible acoustics. I arrived early, before Jade's presentation, and sat in the back row where I could see without being too visible. When she walked onto the stage, my breath caught. She looked different, more confident somehow, more settled in herself. Her hair was longer now, pulled back in a sleek ponytail. She wore professional clothes but with her own twist, a bright scarf that added personality. She spoke about how art could unlock things that words couldn't touch, how trauma lives in the body and sometimes needs nonverbal expression to heal, how she'd learned, through her own difficult experiences, that therapists need spaces to be vulnerable too, that we're all human, that mistakes can be teachers if we let them. She didn't mention me specifically, but I heard echoes of our story in her words. I heard the lessons she'd learned, the growth she'd achieved. When the presentation ended and people rushed forward to talk to her, I slipped out. I didn't know if I was ready to actually speak to her yet. but I'd come. I'd seen her. I'd witnessed that she was okay, more than okay, that she'd survived the crisis and come out stronger. I was walking through the hotel lobby when I heard my name. Maya? I turned. Jade was standing there, slightly out of breath, like she'd run to catch me. I saw you in the back, she said, during my talk. I wasn't sure it was you at first, but then I was sure, and I thought, I can't let her leave without saying hello. Hi, I said, suddenly nervous. Your presentation was incredible. Really moving. Thank you. She smiled, and it reached her eyes. I've been working on that material for a year, trying to turn what happened into something useful, something that might help others. You succeeded. We stood there in the lobby, surrounded by conference attendees rushing past us, and it felt surreal, like being in a dream where time folds in on itself. Do you have time for coffee? Jade asked. Just coffee, no expectations, but I'd really like to catch up, to hear how you've been. I checked the time. I had nowhere I needed to be. Yeah, I'd like that. We found a quiet cafe a few blocks from the hotel, ordered our drinks, sat across from each other at a small table by the window, and for the first time in 2 years we talked. Not as therapist and client, not as forbidden anything, just as two people who'd been through something intense together and had somehow made it to the other side. Jade told me she'd taken a 6-month leave of absence after everything happened, worked with a therapist of her own, examined her boundaries, figured out why she'd let herself get too close. She'd come back to practice with clearer guidelines for herself, better supervision, more awareness of her own triggers and vulnerabilities. I told her about the divorce, about learning to paint again, about dating and failing and trying again, about the studio apartment that had become a real home, about feeling more like myself than I had in a decade. Do you ever regret it? Jade asked quietly. How everything happened, the pain it caused? I thought about that. I regret hurting Rachel. I regret the way it happened, the journal being found instead of me being brave enough to say the truth out loud. But do I regret what I discovered about myself? What we discovered together, even if it was messy? No, I don't regret that. Jade nodded. I feel the same way. I'm sorry for the ethics breach. Sorry that I didn't handle it better. But I'm not sorry I met you, Maya. You changed my practice, made me a better therapist, made me more human. We talked for 2 hours. The conversation flowed easily, naturally, like we'd never stopped. And somewhere in the middle of it, I realized something. The intensity I'd felt before, that electric pull, that desperate longing. It was different now. Not gone, exactly, but transformed into something gentler. Something that didn't demand anything. Just appreciation, affection, the comfortable warmth of genuine connection. Maybe we'd both needed time to become people who could actually be in each other's lives without it being a crisis. When we finally stood to leave, Jade hesitated. Can we do this again? Grab coffee sometime? Be actual friends? I'd like that, I said. I'd really like that. She smiled and I smiled back, and we walked out of the cafe together into the late afternoon sun. I don't know what happens next. Maybe we'll become close friends. Maybe we'll drift apart. Maybe someday, years from now, when enough time has passed and we've both grown even more, we'll discover that what we felt back then wasn't just transference or crisis or forbidden attraction. Maybe it was the beginning of something real, just happening at the wrong time. Or maybe not. Maybe we're meant to be exactly what we are now. Two people who helped each other grow, who crashed into each other's lives at exactly the moment we both needed to wake up. Who survived the wreckage and came out better for it? Either way, I'm okay. Rachel's okay. Even Jade is okay. We all survived. We all learned. We all became more honest versions of ourselves. And isn't that what love is supposed to do? Not rescue us, not complete us, but challenge us to become more fully who we really are, even when it destroys everything in the process, especially then.